The movement to gay marriage in the country is proceeding along different paths. One of them is a path through the courts, through the judiciary, both in the states and at the federal level. And the other is a path going through state legislatures. Maine is a different scenario, and the reason for that is that although the legislature passed a same-sex marriage law last spring in Maine, it's much easier to change the law in Maine through popular initiative. And so there's an effort currently in Maine which is widely believed likely to succeed, to have placed on the ballot a measure that would reverse the legislature's decision, and that will be voted on at the November election. The value is that most of the rights and benefits that come with marriage are actually conferred by the states. There are some very important rights at the federal level, that make no mistake about that, but marriage is first and foremost an institution that is recognized, that is created and protected by the individual states. And they have made the basic decision to have an institution of marriage and to define who can enter it and how you get out of it and so forth. So federal benefits are important, but they're secondary. The main action has to come in the states to recognize same-sex marriage, and we are seeing momentum in that direction. It's not irreversible. There is nothing inevitable about all of this. But when you think about where we stood 10 years ago, just 10 years ago, there was not a single state in the country that even recognized civil unions. And today, I think the last I heard is that about 1/5 of Americans now live in a state in which there is full legal recognition of same-sex couples, some in the form of marriage and others in the form of civil unions. That is dramatic progress. I think we're going to have a lot more pressure, and it's for a very simple reason, and that is that the Defense of Marriage Act does actually a couple of things. First of all, it prohibits the federal government from recognizing same-sex marriages, and therefore prohibits married same-sex couples from receiving any kind of federal benefits. And the other thing that it does is that it allows states to refuse to recognize same-sex marriages that occur in other states. But since we're now seeing more and more states recognizing same-sex marriages, and I think we'll see a few more in the coming years, all of a sudden, for the first time, we have actual same-sex married couples. And they need rights, they need benefits, they need legal protection, they want recognition when they move from state to state. So when the Defense of Marriage Act was first passed, there were no same-sex marriages, and this was a very abstract, theoretical question. Now it's becoming a real question. The main reason why a state ought to consider recognizing same-sex marriages is that marriage is an institution that helps to support families, both couples who live together and any children that they're raising. It's the institution that defines familial relationships and responsibilities, both as between the couple and between the couple and their children. And so if you want stable, healthy, long-term relationships and families in which kids are very often raised, the states believe with good reason that marriage is an institution that you ought to support. And the fact is that a huge number of gay and lesbian couples in this country are not only living together as couples in long-term committed relationships, but a large percentage of them are actually raising children. And it's not good for those children to be raised in a legal environment where they don't have the protections of having their parents be married. And there's no legal relationship between one of the parents and the child being raised. So states have an interest in making sure that those kids are protected in the law, and that we encourage the parents in various ways to stay together in committed relationships. That's what marriage does, and that's what it does for gay families as well as straight families. One of the interesting developments, I think, in the argument around the country over same-sex marriage is that it seems increasingly that people who identify themselves as moderates or even as conservatives politically are willing to accept the idea that same-sex marriage is a good idea, because marriage is a fundamentally conservative institution. And some conservatives, at least, are starting to recognize that it might be a good idea to have this entire class of Americans inside the institution of marriage with all of the effects that it has, and not outside of the institution of marriage. So while for many people on the left or for political liberals in the country, I think same-sex marriage is no longer even a serious issue, the real action to watch in the coming years is going to be among more moderate and conservative intellectuals and ultimately voters, because that's where ultimately I think minds have to be changed, and there are pretty good signs that they are changing.